I don't blame the players for being hesitant to promote vaccines, considering our nation's history and our mistrust of the federal government. We know that history. We don't have time to get into it. But I think considering the number of people who have been vaccinated, which are obviously in the millions, and the fact that it's indiscriminate, there are black and whites and others that have taken the vaccine, I do think it's time for all of us to adopt a mentality that if we have the opportunity to do it, it's something that we should do. And if they come my way with it, I will take the vaccine.
Let me address what you just said quickly.
Sure.
I think as Americans, we are used to a situation where money and power gives you greater access to things, and people feel that that's normal. I think if I were running a league and I could get my hands on vaccines and I could legally distribute it, I would to the players. If you're asking me as an independent arbiter, do I think that that's ethical or moral? The answer is no, I don't. So I disagree with you on principle, but in practice, we probably see, I think there is a case to be made on economic lines along the ones you're making. I think the best way to do it is what the most effective way we've seen internationally is you start with the oldest people, because they're even more with underlying conditions. The oldest, 85 and over, 75 and over, 65 and over, do it like that, and people with underlying conditions and first responders, and then the rest of us wait for it. But okay, it's a separate issue. I want to address what Ron Artest, Meta World Peace, Ron, whoever Artest now, he's one of my favorite people in the industry. He's such a genuine dude, and I actually think here he makes a good point. Athletes should not be forced into positions where they must publicly espouse that they are affirmatively, they're putting their weight behind, yes, everyone should do this. Because if they don't feel that way, then they shouldn't be forced into a hypocritical position. This is, however, if the vaccine is available and they opt not to take it, they shouldn't play. Like that's if they don't, but a public service announcement is something else. They should not be forced to do public service announcements, even if I think it's foolish not to. Now, let me tell you why I think it's foolish not to and what I think their problem is. In the Venn diagram, right, you have the different circles, and where they overlap is the shaded area. This is a perfect storm, another metaphor for it, of this vaccination issue. Number one, they're pro-athletes. Pro-athletes care about what they put in their body. And anyone here is, wait, I'm putting a dead disease in my body. Even the thought of it's disturbing to a lot of people, to me. But, even if you understand the science very well, you still say, ugh, I just don't like the idea of it. And pro athletes want to be sure about what they're ingesting. And unless it's going to help them on the field of play especially. That's one. Two, there's a lot of anti-vaxxer nonsense out there. Just nonsense and low-quality information that many among us have swallowed and kind of internalized and now believe. The anti-vaxxer industry is utter nonsense. Nonsense. That's all. It's nonsense. However, there's an overlap there, too, because many in the population, including in the NBA, have subscribed to it, as many people have subscribed to a lot of low-quality information in recent years and misinformation. And three, you mentioned it, Stephen A., the United States has a bad history with African-American people, don't they? And including experiments on African-American people, right? And so if you are... Yes, so if you're thinking, wait, I'm not going to be, you want me to take that? Are we sure about this? Are you experimenting on me? I think all three things come into play here. All three things. They want to know what they're putting in their body. They mistrust this country based on past experience, and there's a lot of anti-vaxxer nonsense. It's creating a perfect storm. That said, Stephen A., none of that's a good enough excuse not to take the vaccine if it's available. I think if it's available and an athlete turns it down, they shouldn't play. That's different than saying you have to give a PSA, a public service announcement, saying that you are for this even if you're against it. Two separate issues to me.
I certainly don't believe they should be forced to do a PSA. I totally agree with you there. What I will say, however, is that the athletes themselves have put themselves in a position where people feel they should be compelled to do such a thing by virtue of the reach that they have and how they flaunt that reach and the impact that it has. Like, for example, if you want to sit up there and address, and I know that it's apples and oranges in a lot of people's eyes, but not to me. When you sit up there and you want to address racial injustice issues, and you're talking about it's not just about myself, it's about my family, it's about my community, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in a completely different kind of way, so is the coronavirus pandemic. Because the fact of the matter is that when you get ill, chances are you can make someone else ill. Chances are it's going to be a member of your family, a loved one, et cetera, et cetera. And that reality, being as pertinent as it is, does elevate the level of responsibility if you say, under any circumstances, that something is not about you. It's about the impact that you know you have, the voice that you know you have, the fact that you can give a voice to the voiceless, et cetera, et cetera. And that was impetus enough or motivation enough for you to take certain positions and to put yourself on Front Street. Then someone in the medical profession can simply come to you and say, okay, we've got over 400,000 deaths nationwide. We've got millions upon millions who have died from this worldwide. It's contagious, and there's a vaccine that is proven thus far that it can help derail that issue. Do you not feel an obligation to do that? They can ask the question, and if you don't agree with them, okay, then you do have an obligation to articulate why you don't. Not just be silent and disappear. In other words, just like you gave a voice to everything else, you can give a voice to that too. Even if you're following Max Kellerman's suggestion, you shouldn't be mandated to do it. Just like you were willing to come out and speak intelligently and passionately about what you felt about other things that you felt affected the largest segments of our populace, of our society, well, so does this. And as a result, make sure you don't hide. Don't just disappear. Don't just be quiet. Don't just go away. If you were speaking out before, it's relevant to speak out about it now. Why you think I spoke about it this morning? Because we were on the air talking about our hesitancy with COVID-19, the need for vaccinations and stuff like that. But once it happens, would you be willing to do it, Stephen A? Would you be willing to do it, Max and Molly? We talked about this. So now that it's an issue, we don't get to hide and be quiet. We got to be front and center with our positions about that now, too, just like we are about everything else. That's all I'm saying.